Getting a job at a Big Four firm is hard, and things only get harder once you start the actual job. But it's still the dream outcome for most accounting students because of the pay, prestige, and experience that it provides. But is it worth suffering all the effort to try to land the job and then all the long hours and stress to try to keep the job? I spent the first 2.5 years of my career at a Big Four firm, so I have firsthand experience to tell you about so you can decide whether or not the Big Four is worth it for you. Your salary is one of the most important things to look at when deciding whether a Big Four job is worth it or not, and unfortunately, accounting has notoriously had low starting salaries. This is changing, hopefully. EY in particular has said they're raising starting salaries by like 10% or something like that, which I have seen personally. A buddy of mine actually had his starting offer from EY at $94,000, which I thought was crazy. So it's definitely a good sign things are on the up, hopefully, for the Big Four firms in terms of starting salaries. I was offered, when I started a couple of years ago, like 63 or 65,000. So you can see just in 4 years, something like that, 3 or 4 years, it's raised by like 30,000, which is pretty crazy. So it's a good sign things are on the up. But in general, Big Four firms will pay more than smaller and mid-sized firms. Big Four, I would say you can expect a starting salary in the range of 75 to 95,000, depending on where you live, cost of living, things like that. And for a smaller mid-sized firm, I would say it's between maybe 60 and 75,000. So with Big Four firms paying around 75 to 95,000 and smaller and mid-sized firms paying, 60 to 75,000, salary is definitely a big plus and something to consider when deciding whether or not Big Four is worth it or not. But salary isn't everything. The second most common worry when it comes to Big Four is how bad are the hours going to be? And, this is an answer which it really depends. There's busy season, which is much different from the rest of the year, and it also depends on what client you're on. But in general, I would say, in my experience working at Big Four, in general, I'm working 40-ish hour weeks, pretty standard. It wasn't anything too crazy. Sometimes it goes a bit over, sometimes it's actually a bit less. So it really just depends. But in general, pretty standard 40-hour work week. But during busy season, this is what you really need to be worried about, because that's when, the crazy hours really come. I had a few Big Four busy seasons and they varied greatly, which makes this answer so hard to, give, because I had one client which had a pretty chill busy season. We were working from 9 a.m. to 7 or 8 p.m., which is a chill busy season in the Big Four and most of the accounting world. But then I switched to another client where I worked about 9 a.m. to midnight most days and also on the weekends. Not 9 a.m. to midnight on the weekends, but another 5 to 10 hours on the weekend. So it really just depends. And there are even more intense clients than that where you're working 15-hour days on 6 days a week. So it just depends. This is definitely something to consider at Big Four. There's a bigger likelihood that you'll be put on a big public client where you have crazy hours, but that's not to say the mid-sized firms and smaller firms won't have the same issue. They can also have very intense and busy seasons, but at the end of the day, you just never know until you get put on the client. But in general, I think it's safe to assume if you go to a Big Four, there's a higher likelihood that you're going to be dealing with more stress and longer hours, especially in busy season. So if you want to go Big Four, if you're deciding whether or not it's worth it, this is something to definitely be aware of. And when you're working such long hours, the last thing you would ever want to have to worry about is a toxic team environment. Is this something that you should be aware of at the Big Four? I would say yes, definitely be aware of this. It's a big issue in the Big Four, a big issue that's talked about. A lot of people have a problem with this, a lot of people don't. And at the end of the day, it kind of just comes down to luck. Some people get put on a great team with great team members, great management, all that sort of stuff. Other people get put on a team with, not so great people, and it kind of makes things horrible. So it really just depends where you get put. One office could have a great culture, but the same company, another office could have a horrible culture. It really just depends. Even within the same office, there could be one team which is awesome and an amazing place to work, and then another team that's just filled with toxicity and just not a fun place to work. But obviously, when it comes to Big Four, you do hear a lot more about this stuff, and there's a lot of rumors and gossip online, like Reddit, Fishbowl, places like that. And I'm sure this stuff happens, bad management, blackmail. I don't know if blackmail happens, but intense toxic stuff. I'm sure it happens. But in my personal experience, I never dealt with any of that. I've only had great experiences with everyone I've worked with, and it made it very enjoyable. So I have nothing to say bad about my experience with people at Big Four, but I definitely heard from people I worked with oh yeah, that person is a horrible person to work with, or this person switched off that team because that manager is awful. So I hear it, but I never experienced it. So yes, even though it's a huge issue at Big Four, or a potential issue at Big Four, it's also going to be an issue at small and mid-sized firms. You can never escape it. People just, there's a clash of personality sometimes in the office. That's something that you just can't escape. At the end of the day, it's really just a crapshoot of what team you end up on, and unfortunately you don't have a ton of control over that. But this is just something to be aware of when considering Big Four versus a smaller firm. But for most people, the Big Four is just a stepping stone for the rest of their career. So the real question is, how good are the actual exit opportunities? I'll say right off the bat that there are good exit opportunities just because you have that name brand on your resume. If you're at Deloitte, KPMG, PwC, or EY, you're going to get interviews just by having that name on your resume. Like I would know, I applied to a lot of places recently because I was getting a new job, and I got a lot of interviews, and I think it was due to having that on my resume. I will say you need to actually learn stuff so that you can, perform well on your next job or do well in the interviews. You can't just get by with the name on your resume, but it's a huge help in actually getting your foot in the door and getting, your application seen so you can get an interview. Also, your coworkers are great connections for the future. Your network is really important as you progress in your career. So having people, you worked with and developed good relationships early on in your career with, and who are at Big Four, hopefully going to go on and do good things in their career. It's great to have those connections, so that's another big plus of working at the Big Four. So starting your career off at Big Four is going to be a huge help compared to smaller mid-sized firms, just because of the brand name on your resume and the way it's going to help you get future opportunities in the rest of your career. But the Big Four name will only get you so far. You need to have the experience and knowledge to prove that you're worth it to potential employers in the future. Thankfully, you can learn a lot at Big Four. There's so many different clients, so many different industries, and usually bigger clients, which provide great experience. Huge clients, lots of dollars, big companies, prestigious companies. That's really good experience. But at the same time, the one drawback of Big Four is when you work on big clients, you might be more of a cog in a huge machine. Your experience might be more narrow than if you were working at a smaller or mid-sized firm. One of those firms, you're probably on a 2 to 5 person audit, and you're doing all sorts of things. Getting experience with different accounts and assertions, tests, things like that, just a more broad range of experience, which is obviously great. It also might be more hands-on, and you're actually being forced to do things, whereas at Big Four you might be more protected. You're on a team of like 10 people just for payroll. Like I was on a huge client and I was just one tiny piece in that machine, so my experience was much more narrow than it would have been if I had been working at a small firm where I was one of 5, But that's not the only option at Big Four. They also have some smaller clients where you can get more hands-on experience, more wide range of things. So the Big Four can offer great experience and expertise, but there is the chance that you might be stuck on a client where you get a very narrow range of knowledge and experience. So definitely something to consider when you're deciding whether or not Big Four is worth it or not. Okay, just to summarize, the pros of working at the Big Four are higher pay and a name brand on your resume. And the cons are, longer busy season hours and the potential of having a narrow range of experience. So with all those things considered, would I say that the Big Four is worth it? At the end of the day, that is a decision you have to make for yourself. But in my opinion, yes, it is 100% worth it. I would say it's almost worth it based off the brand name recognition alone, because that's going to give you so many potential opportunities in future interviews, things like that. Whether it's, deserved or not, having that Big Four name on your resume is going to be so helpful for you. But you also need to have the experience and knowledge to back it up, which, at Big Four, you can definitely obviously get great experience, but you just have to be aware that you might get a more narrow range of experience unless make an active effort to get on different clients throughout the year. But this is by no means me saying that you must work at the Big Four. I think that working at a smaller or mid-sized firm provides so many benefits. Like I said already, like the more wide range of experience that you'll get, the smaller work environment, so many positive things come from working at those smaller firms. But I would say if you have the chance to work at a Big Four, personally, I would take it. I had the chance between a mid-sized firm and a Big Four firm, and I really thought about it. I really did. And I ended up going with Big Four, and I think that was the right decision, at least for me. But if you're interested in becoming a CPA and landing a job at a Big Four firm, definitely subscribe. You will see so many great videos on this channel about that exact topic. But thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you all next time. Peace.